On October 25, 2024, Sarah Boone was found guilty of second-degree murder. In 2020, Boone zipped her boyfriend, Jorge Torres Jr., in a suitcase and left him there for more than 11 hours. George died of positional asphyxiation as a result. It took 4 years for the case to go to trial, which lasted 7 days. You can find a link to coverage of the trial in the description. Sentencing was scheduled for December 2, 2024. George's mother, Blanca Torres, gave a victim impact statement. George's sister and daughter also gave victim impact statements. Then it was the defense's turn to present mitigating factors. The Orange County Jail's chaplain, 2 women Sarah befriended in jail while awaiting trial, and a friend Boone had been corresponding with, spoke on behalf of Sarah Boone. Then it was Sarah's turn to speak. Boone began by informing the court that this was the edited version. It turns out her attorney, James Owens, had looked over her statement the night before sentencing and advised his client to leave some parts out, which Sarah begrudgingly did. However, after receiving her sentence, Boone decided she was not going to let Judge Kraynick have the last word. In a move that anyone who has followed this case knows is on brand for Boone, she mailed her complete statement to Judge Kraynick, all 28 pages. So buckle up and get ready, because this one is a doozy, and Boone isn't sparing anyone. I'll let Sarah read her statement as it was presented in court, and I'll read the parts Owens told her to leave out. Let's begin. This is how Sarah Boone's letter to Judge Kraynick begins. Mr. Michael Kraynick, I am enclosing, please, my complete statement to you and the world as I partially read during my sentencing hearing. By my reserving particular parts of my very true and meaningful statement, I was hoping to have been graced with your forgiveness, understanding, and consideration in any level or degree. For me, unfortunately, and regardless of whom I had speak on my behalf or the number of, your ignorant mind was already made up by your clear error and full-blown unfair bias against me since your involvement in my crucial case as a whole. I have been unsuccessful in receiving anything from you as a supposed fair and neutral judge, except for your wish that I spend the rest of my life in prison. Please know and always remember, Mr. Kraynick, I forgive you, still and sincerely. Please understand also the judge, according to Cicero, quote, is never to lose sight that he is simply a man, and that he cannot exceed the power given to him by his commission, that not only power, but public confidence has been given to him, that he ought to always very seriously to attend not to his wishes, but to the requisitions of law, of justice, and religion, end quote. I am excited in my appeal, which speaks for itself, my case law as well, in which I am extremely proud to have achieved and will continue doing so now that I am no longer in your corrupt court and free from your malevolent judicial grip. Sarah Boone versus State of Florida. I also have added to my statement, as a result of your blindness and impartiality, foremost your disgust in me as being an outspoken woman, determined defendant, and proactive client, hoping the next time you put on your listening ears and do not unfairly oppress the next as you have so blatantly done me. You will never admit your many judicial errors, nor will the prosecutors theirs, and I will never admit to what you have wrongfully accused me and judged me as. I am not a murderer. I am a survivor. Sarah Boone.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Judge, I would like to call Sarah Boone.
You may proceed.
If you could take this.
Yes, please. Ms. Boone, you can be seated. You've been previously sworn. You may inquire, sir.
For the record, just state your name again.
Sarah Boone.
All right. Now, this is unlike a trial, so you're allowed to speak in a narrative form, as well as I understand you have taken some notes or written a letter that you want to read from, and then you want to speak to the court after that.
Yes.
All right. Why don't you go ahead and get started?
This is actually an edited version of. I had a lot to say. I've had a lot of time to think about things, and I didn't really know how to put it on paper, and I didn't know how much I could say or how little I should say. So what I have here is, like I said, an edited version. But I would like to read the more important parts that I feel that everyone should know that wasn't said in my actual trial. And on top of what I have on paper, I have, this is just the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. So I wanted to read this, and then if I may, I would like to address everyone in my apology on top of my statement.
You may proceed, ma'am.
Kintsukuroi is a kind of Japanese.
Kintsukuroi.
Kintsukuroi is a kind of Japanese ceramic style which means to repair with gold. In this tradition, when a ceramic piece breaks, an artisan will fuse the pieces back together again using liquid gold or gold dust lacquer. So rather than being covered up, the breaks become more obvious and a brilliant new piece of art emerges from the brokenness. It embraces flaws, weakness, and imperfections, and also teaches the essence of resilience. Every crack in a ceramic piece is a part of its history, and each piece becomes more beautiful because it has been broken. This is the wisdom of Kintsukuroi. In my wisdom, and with all of my repairs, then, now, and ongoing, God is, has been, and will always be my artisan. All of my gold is forgiveness. This has held me together, made me shine brighter, and overcome the damage caused by Jorge Torres, the Torres family, the justice system, Orange County Corrections Department, social media, scoundrel detectives, infamy, defamation, ongoing constitutional rights violations, second-degree murder, forced into being pro se. Just as gold is very precious, forgiveness is invaluable. Forgiveness is not an attempt to change or forget who, what, or how you've lived through to be so gold, but an act of grace, humility, and considerable self-compassion to be set free from sorrow. Withholding forgiveness denies your brilliance and adds even greater grief and deeper heartache, irreparable cracks on top of the already that no one deserves, no matter the pain or disappointment, untruths or injustice. It doesn't matter, as the more broken you are, even though now different than before, you've become more outstanding and more extraordinary. Above all, when you let go of blame, misunderstandings, excuses, give up your anger and cease from resentment, this is forgiven. And when you forgive, you heal. And when you heal, you move forward. My goal begins with Jorge Torres, and every time he slapped me, kicked, punched, spit on, raped, stabbed, choked, laughed at, pushed, pulled, dragged, whipped, tripped, stole from, lied, terrorized, threatened, humiliated, forced, degraded, made me cry. Every time he tried to end me, defeat, or destroy. I forgive Jorge for beating me senseless, for trying to sleep because I had to go to work or my son's field trip the next day.
Yeah. So you remember this. So you remember this. Are you drunk right now?
No, no.
How much alcohol did you drink?
Enough to be drunk.
You're slurring your words. You're sleeping up against the door right now.
For ruining my deceased family's heirlooms, traditions, and keepsakes, my son's furniture, destroying the television we watched together. For wrecking our townhome by breaking windows, punching holes in the walls and doors, ramming his entire body into glass doors, kicking in my front and back door over and over and over. for breaking or removing the locks from all of the doors and sometimes the knobs altogether, so I had nowhere to feel safe, including the sacred space of my son's room where he beat me bloody on his bed. For terrorizing and threatening my blind and deaf dogs by leaving the gate open I built to keep them safe, telling me he hoped I'd find their bloated dead body in the pond or scrape their remains off of the pavement, for kicking them off of the bed and throwing across the room because they were trying to protect me. For threatening to make me unrecognizable to my son by breaking all of the bones in my face, like his brother Moses did to him after he kept seeing all of the bruises from George beating me, like all of the times their father beat their mother. For all of the drunken rages and fist fights with so many neighbors when wandering into their apartments during hunting expeditions after I had escaped. For drowning me in liquor and wine because I didn't want to drink,
I
causing me
know how much vodka was in that bottle. And what's the bottle now?
Kind of to throw it out.
What does that mean?
When we drink.
The bottle's empty. I know how much vodka was in there. Enough for 2 people to have a really good time. And who drank it?
to drink, causing me to urinate on myself, then butting the end of the bottle in my face, giving me 2 black eyes and a bloody nose. For making me experience what it is to be threatening to kill my friends and the neighbors when they checked on me to make sure I was alive and in one piece. For threatening to burn down our townhome and set my car on fire because I got a job. For holding me hostage on weekends my son was supposed to come over by keeping my keys around his neck, my phone in his crotch, and a butcher knife stuck in the middle of the table as a warning not to ask anything or try to leave. For stabbing me in the leg and not letting me call 911 for an ambulance or seek help, where I nearly bled to death until I concocted a lie to save him from being arrested. For destroying my phone with a hammer because my son called. For me experiencing ever being arrested and after today, prison. For being...
I'm gonna go to court and I'm gonna tell the judge, listen, my fiance has nothing to do with it. It's all my fault. We were both drinking and it got out of hand. It's an isolated situation. It has never happened before. I love my fiance. She's a good woman. Never been in trouble in her life. She has a 7-year-old son that she loves and cherishes.
A blind Boston Terrier.
She has 2 dogs. One is blind, one is deaf. She goes around and she's driving and sees an animal that's injured. She'll stop in the middle of the street, no matter what kind of traffic it is, just to make sure that that animal doesn't get injured any more than where it already has. We both love each other. We both live together. Yes, every relationship has their arguments, but we are not the type of people that you guys are portraying us to be.
She
Especially her. So please, if you can,
dismiss
this case.
Closed.
Drop it. She is not the type of person.
Good person.
She's a great person.
Angel.
I know she'd be an angel, but she's close to it.
Best thing that has ever happened to you.
Yes, ma'am. And I love you to death. And I hate that we're going through this right now.
Sonnet.
What?
And they did.
Good, I love you, baby. What else you want to say? God will prevail and will take us out of this situation. Love you.
For beating me almost blind, crushing my occipital lobe. for having me experience what it means to see stars, like in the cartoons, where a character has a tall lump on their head. I had that too, and many times. For dragging me downstairs by my hair in the middle of the night just to sit next to him. For taking my car driving drunk with my debit card to buy more alcohol while I slept, even after I kindly explained the importance of my car to take my son to school foremost, me to work, and he to his batterers intervention classes and probation officer meetings, where I would be forced to sit for hours in the parking lot waiting for him.
No. I live down in Lake Granada Cove.
Lake Granada Cove. Okay. So kind of tell me how you came here today, or
Well, I had been calling.
come down here. I'm
calling.
You can call your ex-wife or current wife?
Yes.
Okay.
No. Ex-wife. I've been divorced about a year and a half. About 11:30 is when I started calling to find out, because this is supposed to be her day. Her child.
Okay.
She's generally not very good about always doing it. She drink.
They called back and said she was still there, or she came back.
For causing me so much trauma and pain, mentally, physically, emotionally, I had to be hospitalized more than once. For destroying my reputation and integrity, for my M for murderer scarlet letter, not letting me feel safe to live, talk to other people, spend time with my son, have a job, friendships, simply go to the bathroom with the door closed, or go to sleep soundly or comfortably. I forgive George for lying, for him trying in so many ways, so many times, to end me with his terrifying love. I also forgive the Torres family, his mother and father foremost, also his 2 ex-wives and daughters, all for knowing who George was, capable of, and has done in the past, his history of violence and where he learned it, then to keep turning a blind eye when I would ask for help. All of his siblings, including Farrell Torres, who is now on his way to prison for stabbing the mother of their baby in the side of her head. For everyone who knew what George was doing to me, sometimes how and when, but allowed and enabled. I forgive them for caring too late. I hope they all ask themselves while quiet and comfortable in bed at night the uneasy question, what could I have done to stop this from happening to both of them? And after all the time Sarah tried to, by asking for help, from all of us, and so many times. Another great contributor of my gold is social media, with its greed, insensitivity, deception, obvious exploitation, and advantageous gain from my criminal case as a whole, and for sentencing me by anticipation as a result of ignorance and hate, conjured and fabricated by the organized crime that is social media, which condemned me in the court of global public opinion since the beginning. My family law case is the new prey waiting to be picked apart and pillaged from me being made infamous by social media in my criminal case. It simply seems I cannot forgive and be forgiven and move forward. Social media has made me a pariah. It has caused great oppression and undeniable disadvantages, especially by broadcasting and manipulating my cases online. In my criminal case, as a result, my opportunities to be given a fair, proper, and uninfluenced, successful conclusion was heavily depleted and poisoned. I forgive them. Also, all of the media tycoons for not having a life of their own, trying so desperately to make themselves seem so right by making me appear so wrong. Forgiveness for prejudgment, ridiculous theatrics, lies, making and taking blood money from my and others' misfortunes, accidents, and catastrophes. It's all over their hands and their keyboards. And even after all that's been said and done, theorized, hypothesized, scrutinized, and blasphemed, in my case, still no one knows me.
My gold also runs deep for my prior attorneys Mauricio Padilla, who sold me the world with empty promises, then abandoned his responsibilities as my attorney after taking 2.5 years of my life. when finally realizing he was in over his head, all while hoarding JAC dollars to fund his staycations with his family when in town from Miami, for having resources ready and available, not allowing me, the client, to ever utilize, which could have greatly progressed my case and perhaps concluded only for him to decide water parks, fine dining, and choice hotels were more important, and on the JAC's dime, I forgive Frank J. Bankowitz for committing perjury to the judge and on court record about my attempts to be a proactive defendant and client, inquiring about my discovery, then trying to communicate with no answer or correspondence in any manner for 1 full year and 2 months before I was able to finally meet with him in the courtroom, only to receive his motion to withdraw. Frank J. Bankowitz is forgiven for his greed in taking $15,000 from JAC, who honorably aid indigent defendants as myself for taking advantage of and robbing the justice system by lying and avoiding clients, taking their money and the JAC's. Winston E. Hobson receives my forgiveness, who also unethically perjured himself to the judge and on court record about all the progress and attorney work did in my case for the 2 months he was court appointed as for his allegations of my supposed unethical requests, which meant me asking about my discovery and trying to have him file a motion for my lawful inclusion to my pretrial conferences cited under FRCP Discovery Rule 3.220. I wanted to be included in my case and no progress from being excluded by Bankowitz and Padilla over 3 years prior. Forgiveness also in telling me he would return in a week with my discovery, only to receive his motion to withdraw in the meantime, still not receiving my discovery, and I filing my own motion asking me to go to all my hearings, including my pre-trials. Continued forgiveness in his greed and selfish intentions, also for robbing the JAC and indigent defendants at $15,000 more for nothing, justifying any work he really did do in the handful of days he represented me as my attorney. Finally, and with all my gold received from this one, I forgive Patricia A. Cashman for her mean, naughty, egotistical attitude and not listening or caring that I finally received my discovery I kept asking her for, which the fully withheld from me, citing her ridiculous, untrue reasons was because I saw with my first attorneys 4 years prior, and while she being my present at the time attorney, I saw not 1 page of or any digital evidence of my discovery, and she prohibited me from seeing. Patricia A. Cashman is also forgiven for admitting I had a right to bond I asked her for, so I could actually utilize one of my rights as opposed to having them always violated as prior and still ongoing. Then her deterrence of all my opportunities to do so for all her lies, condescension, gross unnecessary arguments and anger that I asked any questions and wanted to understand, for her doing nothing other than give me an even harder time and request transcripts and brazenly lie for over $16,000 for doing so, also from the gracious resources provided from the JAC. I forgive Patricia A. Cashman for being a liar and a bully. Forgiveness for all those who did not include me to receive my $15,000 share I worked for when Judge Kraynick forced me to be my own attorney to represent myself as pro se. I actually and finally got my own discovery almost 5 years later. filed motions all prior should have done, making them the most expensive motions ever at over $46,000 between 3 prior attorneys, Frank J. Bankowitz, Walter E. Hobson, Patricia A. Cashman. Would they have done so when supposedly representing me? The motions would have been priceless for the proper use of the JAC funds toward ethics, professionalism, honesty, and freedom. I honorably utilize my JAC resources and mentorship as a proactive, indigent defendant, avidly defending myself against the liars, thieves, and real villains in my criminal case. Who really is the criminal? The JAC can hopefully include their forgiveness for them also. Judge Wooten and Kraynick, I have great forgiveness for also in not protecting me in listening to my valid requests for judicial intervention so I could properly and fairly defend myself against my charges. Instead, I had to defend myself against the attorneys all appointed by the judge and court against their lies and exaggerations, reasons unjustifiable why they were really creeping away from the battlefield and abandoning their professional duty as my attorney. Judge Kraynick, I forgive you for not giving me any opportunity to stand at your pulpit, to stand at all, to explain the real, truthful side of the story. I believe if the justice system, including yourself, would and should have done any vital homework on the already almost see-through attorneys from being spread so thin and simply sending an email to care about their present workload, number of clients, trial schedules already in place before throwing another inmate defendant, unknowing client on the heaping, unimportant pile of warm bodies. More tax dollars could be conserved and less time consumed and wasted for everyone, regardless of what part they play in the supposed system of justice. My forgiveness is deepened for taking even greater time of mine away, years, by not caring to ask me anything about anything to understand so you could justly render your life-depriving judgments and withhold any more bias and prejudice. Foremost, Judge Kraynick, I forgive you for kicking me when I was down and choking the life out of my constitutional amendments. Most profoundly, my sixth right to counsel as a result of my wholehearted use of my first right to free speech in being my own advocate since no one else would be and received a paycheck for. In all of my free speech experience-driven letters, only for remedy in any collaboration inclusion, receiving my discovery as an inmate, defendant, and client, not removal of any attorneys to cause more delays or any reason or excuse you may try to force on me and have already inappropriately accused me of doing prior with your heavily insinuated strategies of mine to try and deflect the glaring red flags, disappointments, and true crime in and of the justice system to this day and all forward. I do not forfeit my rights, any of them ever, especially my right to be bold, outspoken, and right in my real-life experiences with the legal and justice systems. You weren't there, Judge Kraynick, in anything. No meetings, phone calls, visits, and still took my rights and oppressed harder. I must now defend myself against you, Raying. You do not care, too late as all the others, and retaliate further against me as a still proud citizen of the United States of my America, freely, excitedly using my God-given rights to still try and defend myself, to stand all the way up for you to remove my freedom altogether by allowing and approving my stab wound, bloody body parts, rapes, bumps, bruises, and all of the rest of the beatings I endured. I hope you can finally see and understand just some of the pain from the extreme difficulties, obstacles, and unfairness, especially in my due process, you have added in my criminal case and life as an inmate, defendant, and client. All is forgiven. For detectives Kepsel and Lowen, I forgive their demonization, lies, blacklisting, coercion, lawbreaking, solicitation of my case before I even arrive at the corrections department to be booked and fingerprinted. This can be seen in my unbeknownst interrogation video, where I ask what they are doing, what all the hanging was during their texting swarm, while I naively sit there waiting to be arrested, which they knew would happen the day before. For Kepsel, to bold face lying on the stand to the judge and were on record. She didn't tell me to come to the station to pick up my phone. Why else would I go? I didn't even know about the surprise interrogation. I forgive them for also lying how the news showed up to record my walk of shame, handcuffed and confused on camera. I forgive them for trying to make me lose from the beginning by starting the unquenchable wildfire of sensationalism and distortion, ignorant hate, defamation, and greed by unlawfully broadcasting who they wanted the world to think I was by their schemes, learned lessons, and fraudulent strategies from the school manipulation and taking advantage. How much did they make off of me and are still for calling it in? Then, removing the curtain to expose their personally twisted, murdering monster. Also, my forgiveness and greater gold comes from wondering why nothing viable in my defense was taken from my townhome, aka the crime scene, to aid in my truth, such as the butcher knife, 5-prong garden claw, or hammer under the table together outside, where George had easy access for use if I tried to leave or call for help while being held against my will during his rageful binges, or my bloody pillowcase stained from me being backhanded because I hid the magnum-sized bottle of vodka from him. Why weren't any crime scene photos taken of holes hatched in walls and doors, some doors missing knobs and all locks? George removed cracked windows, broken furniture, obvious unnatural destruction in my townhome. How and why were those myths uncared about were not questioned, so I could explain some of my terror. It makes no difference. All is forgiven. Prosecutors Mr. J and Mr. Cacciatore, my forgiveness is also extended for your inappropriate attributed motives, for having to go through years of my pictures, videos, texts to erroneously piece together your deceitful, damning version of what really happened and who I am. After so much availability, and for so long, you were finally able to make the circle fit into the square. I forgive your antics, theatricals, ludicrous comments to make sure the world got their money's worth while watching with ignorant pitchforks and burning torches, hoping for the best. Mew, which is my worst. Instead of dropping the mic, Mr. J, you dropped the bat for the yelling, finger-pointing, and intense underlining to foreshort theoreticals and fantasticals on the jury by using imaginary space adventures and fictional characters to blind and bedazzle them with your far, far away from the truth dramatizations. In all of your pieced-together productions, I forgive you most for never seeing the light in people, their human goodness, humor, and big hearts. You wake up to seek out the opposite, to condemn, to take lives in your own way. See the good that does exist in all of us, inherently and unforced, even as the proud Mr. J stated, the kicked dog that bites. Mr. J, who kicked the dog in the first place. In my wisdom, it's usually best to leave sleeping dogs lie, then they don't bite. My gold goes out to the jury for not understanding my cracks, from being blinded from the injustice and malpractice in all of the judicial and prosecutorial errors, the very apparent violations of my constitutional rights during my case and entire trial, which caused mass confusion and dysfunction. I forgive the jury truly for being wary from this confusion and dysfunction, also from being hungry and tired and wanting to go home to their families after being away from in full capacity for 2 full weeks. I understand from this and their brash, misguided, corrupted decision, I was wrongfully judged a murderer instead of a survivor. For this, all is forgiven. For this, I can still survive and stand tall, having an even greater, the greatest opportunity to finally be understood in the Supreme Court for my appeal. I didn't lose. God just wanted me to win in a different way, freedom in forgiveness.
In the end, I forgive myself for not choosing my life sooner, for not being more brave, vigilant, bolder, and outspoken, stronger, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, for being hopeless, desperate, simple-minded, weak, and inexperienced. I forgive myself for not realizing I was enduring a life of domestic violence and that the vicious cycle of never ends. I had nothing to compare to. I've never been hit by a man ever before in my life. I was raised hitting a woman was wrong and should never happen. No excuse. I forgive myself for not escaping permanently, for not fighting back sooner to save myself, my son, my dogs, home and car. Having 20/20 hindsight, thinking of everything I could have done differently or better to avoid the outcome. I think about this every day since. Also, of all the good days we had together, for him at least, while I was constantly in hyperdrive, high alert, and paranoid,
Sarah.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
You.
Sarah.
You.
Sarah.
Stupid.
making sure I did everything right all the time. If not, the great possibility I would be ended as George threatened me with so many times before. I forgive myself for falling in love with a monster, and no matter how grotesque he may become, I still loved him, hoped, and forgave. I tried breaking the spell so he wouldn't be a monster anymore. I saw who he was inside. George made me then, now, and always love him for all of his cracks also. We made each other our own brilliant pieces of art from the cracks and repairs. Unfortunately, not all cracks can be. In all of my forgiveness, George is my greatest lesson and will forever be a part of me. I think of him every day and still speak to him when alone on the rec yard. I ask his forgiveness and that he looks for me at the gates of heaven so I can tell him how sorry I am, endlessly, and that I never stopped loving him. In all of it and still. When I first came to jail, I put my mat under my bed and cried all day and all night for months, only falling asleep from being so exhausted with grief. I wrote him letters. I wrote his family and his daughters, apologizing for asking for their forgiveness. But due to fear that my life or sons would be jeopardized, I did not send. I am sorry. I cannot begin to fathom any of their grief and sadness. Please forgive me. Almost everything reminds me of him, seeing my stab wound especially, every day especially. It truly reminds me that all I really did live through. George haunts me. He is everywhere. I believe because I do still love him, think of him, and miss his laugh the most. In my heart, I know he is with me and understands that this tragedy was not intentional. I hope everyone can, his family foremost. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please wholeheartedly know that, and always, I would never. Forgive me, George. Forgive me, Torres family. Forgive me, Judge Kraynick. To the entire planet, please forgive me. I graciously and humbly ask for consideration, for forgiveness to be extended instead of judgment, for reconciliation and restoration for all of us to move forward. My apology is profuse and ceaseless.